Welcome to your Daily 5 for Wednesday, May 15th, 2024. Some of you may be aware that yesterday and the day before there were two big announcements or keynotes or whatever they're describing them as from both OpenAI and Google about their generative products in different spaces. In OpenAI's case, they announced and released, I believe, their ChatGPT 4o product, which was highly focused, based on what they were saying and what they were showing, on having a conversational machine that you could talk to and joke with and have it comment on your fashion choices. And then in Google's case, it was a little bit more expansive. It was a 2-hour keynote for Google I/O where they were talking about almost everything of the same type, where, again, conversational back and forth with a machine model where you would ask it things and it would tell you things in this very naturalistic way. And I watched most of both of those, the announcement and the keynote, and I've watched some of the demo videos that OpenAI put out, and I am still somewhat surprised at the direction these companies are taking in trying to promote these products, because it feels like it is the counterintuitive way to do it. And what I mean by that is they're trying to make these things seem like they are false or fake or artificial people. So they're trying to make the voices sound more empathetic, and again, conversational kept coming up. And it can have different inflections and tones, so it'll sound like a real person. And there was this big emphasis on this, and Google to some extent had this as well. Google also did far more on the data side, which makes sense. You can't talk for 2 hours about how something sounds fun. You have to demonstrate a little bit more to that, especially if you're in front of developers, whereas OpenAI felt more of a strut of what they got their thing to sound like. But in both cases, what is surprising to me is that there are actual really interesting and potentially transformative parts to what these companies are working on, but they're not showing that off. They're showing off the dumb stuff, the glitzy kind of surface level gloss stuff that actually, depending on how it's read, could be detrimental to what they're trying to do. Because the more you make these things sound like artificial people when they absolutely are not, the more you run the risk of tripping over the same uncanny valley problem that CGI people have, where people start to get creeped out by it. It's cute for a while, and then there's a point where you go, oh, wait a minute. And people will start to react as, oh, this sounds like what Skynet was. This is like a Terminator scenario. And then you're going to have people calling for legislation. You're going to have people that are going to be anti these tools. I mean, there already are from the creative spaces, but it's going to broaden out. And instead of showing things like, there's a great demo that OpenAI had of somebody with a vision problem of some kind in London that was asking his phone to describe what was around him. And it was doing this in a really wonderful way. And that's where you can see the potential of these things. There was another one that I want to say Google did, maybe. I can't remember. Maybe it was OpenAI, where there was a father and son, and they were trying to work out a math problem, but in such a way that the son was learning the solution, not just being told. And I remember that. I mean, when I was younger, I would ask my parents for help with math stuff, and my parents weren't all that great in math, and neither am I. And so there was a limit to the help they could give me. To have a tool like this, that you could say, I don't want you to give the student the answer, but I want you to be able to kind of guide the student to where they need to be, instead of trying to rely on somebody who may not have that expertise. That's tremendously beneficial. And instead, most of these demos focus on goofy, silly, admittedly cutesy once or twice things like, there was one that OpenAI did where the person put on a silly hat and said, should I wear this hat to the interview? And it said, no, not unless you're trying to look like a goofball. And people laugh at it, but that's useless. That's not really demonstrating anything, and is likely not really as responsive as we thought. Whereas the stuff that's relying on data and actual information, hard-coded information, I am far more likely to believe that those things will work the way they're being demonstrated. But when somebody's telling a dad joke to a machine model and it's judging the humor of it, do I believe for 1 second that there's any relevance or any actual truth in that demo? I do not. Machines do not understand human humor because they're not humans. But if you're saying, hey, I'm trying to solve a math problem and I can't quite figure out how, can you guide me to the solution? Yeah, I believe it can figure out how to navigate that. And so again, we're getting the wrong stuff promoted by these companies, and they're all doing it. I mean, it's just, I understand to some degree where it comes from, that they think people won't accept it if it's too robotic, but I actually think it might be the opposite. I think the more robotic you make it, the more accepting people will be. But I don't know. I'm curious. If you've seen some of these demos or watched some of the stuff I've linked here, what do you think? Let me know. Later.